Hi, this is Ryan Lawler with TechCrunch TV. I'm here at the 500 Startups PreMoney Conference with Paul Graham of Y Combinator. Paul, thanks for joining us. You shared some numbers today about number of companies that you funded and sort of total valuation. So how big is Y Combinator? Has it gotten?
Okay, let me try and remember the numbers. We have funded 564 startups so far. That's including the current batch. The current batch has 53 startups in it. The total post-money valuation of the 285 that actually have post-money valuations, which you can get by either raising an equity round, getting acquired, or dying.
Right.
In which case it's zero, is 11.6 billion, a little over 11.6 billion. And the total amount the 511 prior to the previous batch have raised is 11.7 billion.
Wow.
No, 1.7 billion, sorry.
Oh, no.
1.7 billion.
Okay.
It would be bad if the amount they had raised was the same as their valuation. That would actually be bad.
That'd actually be bad, yeah. So that's kind of huge, but you said earlier today that a lot of that's concentrated in sort of the top 10%.
The top 10%.
Yeah, okay.
The top 10.
The
top 10 out of those 564, well, really 511, account for 8.6 of the 11.6 billion, which means the remaining 501 combined account for 3 billion. But when I calculated that, I was actually pleasantly surprised. I expected, I thought it was wrong. I had to go back and look at the numbers and say, did I use something wrong? Because I expected it would be like 98%, and it's really more like, 3/4.
Okay. So how do you, when you look at sort of finding those diamonds in the rough, like that's just part of the model, right? Like how are you helping those companies become sort of the top 10?
Well, honestly, to become the top 10, they have to become breakout hits. And we can't make them into breakout hits. We can save them from dying early, and we can sort of get them, we sort of like, if you imagine like we're like the catapult on an aircraft carrier.
Okay.
We can get them off the ground without crashing, right? But the companies that become that successful, or it's like a plane going to 50,000 feet instead of 40,000 feet, To be honest, there's a little bit we can do. We can sort of give them general advice, but the giant hits are not our doing.
Okay. So last summer, you had a class of, I think it was 84 startups.
Yeah.
And you said that something in the process broke and you had to scale back and sort of reassess.
Yeah.
What happened there?
We had, in programming, we had what's called an n-squared algorithm, where the number of interconnections grows as the square of the number of inputs, which is really bad. What that means is like sort of the work like suddenly explodes, right? And what we noticed was like halfway through the batch, I still didn't really understand what every startup was doing.
Okay.
Like we as a firm didn't really understand what every startup was doing. By demo day, we were in touch with it, but usually we're like much more in tune with them. And it was because we had this model where every partner had to understand what every startup was doing. When the startups booked office hours, it was non-deterministic. They didn't know who they were going to get office hours with. And very early on, when there were just like a couple people doing office hours, that was the right model because like everybody was just knew everything, right? But it blew up. It blew up with 84. So we sharded YC. We changed a bunch of things. The biggest change was now each startup picks a partner that's their partner, and that's their interface, and that scales a lot better, right? That's not n-squared, and it works. Like this latest batch this summer is so easy. I can't remember the last time Y Combinator felt so easy for us.
Okay, and so you expect that you'll be able to sort of scale up again?
Yeah. Who knows exactly what the next bottleneck will be? That's the thing about bottlenecks. You can never predict them, but there's probably a bottleneck. Like if we started to have like, 15 or 20 partners advising startups instead of 5 or 6, then there would be a bottleneck there, just coordinating all those people, right? So we're now order N, as they would say. So we probably have room for maybe 3x growth before we run into trouble from the sheer number of partners.
Okay. Now, in part of your talk, you talked a little bit about things that could change in VC or that you expect. Number one was making decisions faster.
Yeah,
and,
which is already starting to happen.
Right. And the other one was really interesting, which was, don't stick to a certain percentage of equity, right?
Yeah.
That you're asking. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, VCs have sort of financial models for how much they need to invest and what percentage of the company they need to buy for it in order to get positive returns and stuff like that. And they're really nervous, somewhat justifiably so, because if you're going to lose money as a VC firm, you won't know it till about like 6 to 8 years later, right? And so these models, they've become sort of religious about them. They're like, religion may often be driven by fear. But they really feel like they can't buy less than 20% of a company in a Series A round. And so what happens now is the VCs have a certain percentage of the company they need to get. And then in a competitive deal, since that number can't move, the only number that can move is the valuation. But if the valuation increases and the amount of the company sold is fixed, what that means is the amount invested increases. Arbitrarily, like driven by market forces, not by the amount of money that the company needs. And what that means is the most successful startups, or at least the companies that are the most successful at fundraising, which is somewhat correlated with how successful they are, end up raising too much money. They raise more money than they wanted to invest. They would like to, these companies would like to sell half as much stock for half as much money, but that's not one of the options. And what's happened is the market, like the VCs have like sort of dug in, and the market is moving away, and like as they spread apart, it produces this stretching rubber band. There's a lot of potential energy there. And so if there was a VC that broke ranks and said, we're going to give companies as much money as they need, instead of having the amount of money be determined by these random external forces, they would get all the good startups. And I think they would not be hosed by it. I think that the VC's models, they will discover, because they're gonna have to do this eventually. You can't fight market forces forever. And I think what they will discover is that a lot of them, especially the best ones, end up making more money.
Because they have the best startups.
Yeah, and because there will be more good startups, VC is starting from like this individual tiny bespoke business into more of this sort of mass standardized business. And mass standardized businesses, at least the good ones, tend to make more money, right? But it's this painful transformation to them. It's like they're being ripped apart and put back together again,
Excellent. Well, thanks for being with us, and thanks for doing the interview.
All right, that was fast.